Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to our first membership meeting. We are so excited to officially kick off April with our first meeting together. And if you are a member with us, we just want to be the first to say welcome. We are so happy to have you here and be part of the Eating Disorder Hope Inner Circle community. We definitely understand firsthand the struggle that's involved with an eating disorder, whether you're an individual or if you're a family member joining us today. Everyone is in need of support and encouragement, and we hope that you can find that here. I am Crystal with Eating Disorder Hope, and I am joined with the lovely Jacqueline Eckern, who is the founder and president of Eating Disorder Hope. And we are excited just to be here to get to know you today, to hear some of your stories and questions, to encourage you however we can. And that was the whole intention of this membership. We wanted you to be able to find a place where you could feel connected to others. You know, the eating disorder journey is an isolating one. It's one that feels very overwhelming, confusing, and alone a lot of the times. And we want to be able to break those barriers and help you break those barriers by having a safe place of community that you can come, talk to other people, share the things that are on your heart and on your mind, questions that you have. You can bring all of that here. And before we kind of get started with sharing our stories and recovery stories today, I wanted to point out just a couple quick things if you're joining us live on the call. So you are in attendee mode if you are joining us today, meaning that you can listen and you can submit questions to us. And the way that you can do that is through the question pane of your control panel. So again, if you're joining us live, please feel free to submit any questions or comments via the question pane of your control panel. And we will be watching and moderating those as those come in and reading out loud. So we would love to hear your thoughts. I know there's a few of you joining us live right now, so feel free to share any comments that you have. And we definitely want to hear your feedback. You know, as we begin this membership program, we want to know what you want as a valued member of our community. So right now we have scheduled monthly meetings for the individual and family memberships, but let us know if you're wanting something not as frequent. We are open to hearing that too. So let us know your thoughts in the question pane. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to open up the platform for Jacqueline, who has so graciously agreed to share a little bit about her recovery story and her journey and what led her to found Eating Disorder Hope, and just share some of the valuable lessons and hope that this may encourage you wherever this finds you today. So Jacqueline, welcome. Thanks for being with us today. It's so nice to have you.
Thank you, Crystal. I'm really excited for our first meeting, and I appreciate all the members that are here today. Liana from Project Heal had planned on joining us today also, and unfortunately she had a family emergency, so she won't be joining us today. We will certainly invite her back another time, and instead we're going to be Crystal and I sharing about our own recoveries, giving back to the eating disorder community, and any valuable recovery tips or insights we can provide to you that might be helpful to you in your journey. And you know, the philosophy of Eating Disorder Hope is always take what you want and leave the rest. We really believe in the dignity of the individual and your own wisdom in charting your own recovery course. So we love to share what has worked for us, and yet we also honor opposing different views. So again, take what you want and leave the rest, and hopefully we can give you a few pearls today that will empower you in your recovery journey. Or if you're a family member or a good friend, give you some encouragement for this loved one and some ideas of possible ways to support them. So I'd like to start with just sharing what led to Eating Disorder Hope. And it's founded because I had a very severe eating disorder. And so I was going to give you the background, cliff notes of that, and then how it evolved to Eating Disorders Hope, so that you could know the foundation of this membership that you're in. Though I started Eating Disorder Hope, it is absolutely not about me. It is about the community of the online eating disorder recovery community. And we have now over 300,000 folks a month coming to Eating Disorder Hope. And that's a big part of why we started this membership, because again, we want our content, our events, our forums, all we do to be representational of this community. So that's why we're so honored that you've become members. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm 50 years old, and when I was born, I had a great upbringing, good parents, all of that, loving home, and then had some childhood trauma that occurred when I was about 4. And this entailed a birth defect that I had had, where one of my legs was just slightly shorter than the other. But the issue for me was I had to go into hospitalization and have, I think it was about 7 surgeries over my childhood. And during those times of surgery, I would be in the hospital for 3 months at a time. And I would have these painful procedures done to my leg every day. And unfortunately, my family was not able to be there with me. I was seeing a specialist out of state. They had their own struggle to raise their family and provide and that sort of thing. So they would try to come down and see me occasionally. But largely, I did that on my own. From about 4 to 13. And so that trauma, just like so many other folks with eating disorders that have experienced trauma, and there's all different types of trauma, right? There's big T and little t trauma. Big T trauma, I think, is maybe really physical violation or deep shock, like if you've been through a major event by nature or something like that. And little t trauma is often more repetitive, but it could be just subtle rejection by friends or siblings, or things that happen in the environment that aren't really enormous, but over time they're detrimental to you. So this trauma was really the start, I think, for my eating disorder. We know that eating disorders are when a certain genetic disposition meets an environmental stimulation or stimuli, and then for certain individuals, probably only about 3% of society, they luck out and get an eating disorder, and I was one of them. So I went through all that trauma with the eating disorder stuff and never really dealt with it. And I know as a therapist, and with all the people we talk to at Eating Disorder Hope, there are so many individuals I have come across that have much worse trauma than me, or maybe not even significant trauma. But if we don't deal with these enormous hurts or feelings of abandonment or betrayal, or even, like in this case, it's almost like a violation, right? Because these were surgeries and trauma, couldn't control it, all that stuff. It eats away at us while we're in really formative years about our perspective of life, how powerful we are in life, how confident we are, whether or not we can trust others, intimacy, all these kinds of issues. So I went through life. I was a perfectionistic, looking for approval kind of gal, and I got great grades and had lots of friends, and really strove, if that's a word, to have approval all the time. That was my addiction, is approval, you know, and that worked for a while. And then I got into my teen years, and I had these expectations of myself clear up here, there you go, clear up here, and I felt like I was right here. And that gap didn't sit well with my perfectionistic, injured sense of self, and I was really looking for a way to suppress and control my feelings. And I saw myself as such a good girl in my mind that I didn't really see some of the other things that friends of mine now have said they struggled with, like drinking or promiscuity or things like that. That wasn't my deal. It was food. And somehow I started really kind of obsessing about food and using it to meet needs that food was never designed to meet, and pulling away from others to get those feelings of security and intimacy met, and deepening my relationship with food. But alas, in junior high and high school, there's quite a focus on body image that I bought into, unfortunately. And as a side note, I just want to encourage all of us to be strong advocates for positive body image for young women and young men at all ages, so that they don't get into that, you know, I don't want to say hatred, but self-rejection that can go on when your body type doesn't meet a very narrow standard of beauty and thinness. But I did buy in, and I started dieting, and then when I went off the diet, started binging, and my weight moved around a little bit, and that was very troubling. And then I started not being able to cope and really acting out and quitting school and moving out of my parents' house and binging and purging, and just really quite a mess. And my family was put through a tremendous amount of trauma. I mean, I was so volatile in my emotions. I think a large part of it was the binging and purging, but there was also some biological depression and anxiety going on. So really ugly years that were painful. I forgive myself. I see what I learned in that, but darn, it was hard. And I still hate that I put my siblings and my folks through that. After those teen years, got into super achieving again. I was a stockbroker and you know, succeeding again, and did that for a while, but that didn't work, and it all fell apart again, and I would quit jobs, and I would binge and purge, and I just could not get my life together. This went on until I was 28 years old. So the eating disorder really took hold in fiercely at 16 till I was 28. It was pretty crazy. I think that I was perceived as somebody that wasn't going to make it. That what a disappointment, you know. But I went into treatment at 28 and was there for 30 days, and that was life-changing for me. Now, treatment is a scary thing. Nobody wants to do that if you can avoid it, but it was life-changing for me. Getting into a place where people were supervising me 24/7, where I couldn't go purge, helped me break that cycle that I was dependent on of purging constantly. And also I wasn't able to weigh all the time, and we did a lot of interpersonal therapy, one-on-one, nutrition counseling, group therapy, and also some questioning of the paradigms of society that were really impressive to me. Like the fact that, I don't know if you guys ever consider this, but we're just in this little blip of time that we're obsessed with this, or have been obsessed with this almost boyish adolescent build, you know, and I certainly didn't have that, and a lot of my friends in treatment didn't have that. And what they were showing us, the psychiatrists that led this group, were so interesting, showing pictures of women and actually they should have shown us men too, but they didn't, in different societies and different cultures, and what was held as beautiful there that was very diverse from what we were seeing as the be-all, end-all of beauty. And then also looking at just the history in the U.S. of body types back into, you know, the 1800s and that sort of thing. So all of that cumulatively was a great starting place for treatment. And it was a big deal to go into treatment. I had to quit I had to take a leave from yet another brokerage job. My family was just, they'd seen so many starts and blow-ups that it was like, oh, is this just drama? There was a lot of drama. And so it was tough, but I went in, I paid for it myself, got a little insurance help, and then when I got out, I worked for about 4 years on and off with a therapist, and that work was pivotal. I reversed some things in my wiring. that I could never have changed on my own. And I concluded that I wanted to make lemonade out of lemons, right? So I was going to take all this pain and become a therapist and help others. And that really gave me a lot of fight because there was a lot of 2 steps forward, 1 step back during those 4 years of therapy. So to wrap this up, I went back to college, got my bachelor's degree, then got my master's degree. I got married along the way. I really stabilized. I'm like so boring and stable now as a crack up compared to who y'all would have met back then. And I started a private practice specializing in eating disorders. And then I started this Yahoo $8 a month website to get folks to come to a support group in Fort Worth, Texas. And that website took off. And so we had more and more people coming, and we thought, hey, we'll put up some articles and we'll let them know about some events. And it has now grown over all these years to the size Eating Disorder Hope is now, with 300,000 visitors a month. And we're growing rapidly. We're also getting a tremendous amount of international visitors. All of that time frame, I would say recovery continued, and becoming a therapist and working with clients is the best recovery of all. I mean, you have to be solid in your own to work with anyone just out of integrity, right? And I was, but there was and continues to be evolution in body image, comfortableness with my authentic self, sharing feelings, all of that. And that's kind of the gist of what led to Eating Disorder Hope and my recovery.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Jacqueline. It's a beautiful thing just to hear about your own journey and how, like you said, making lemonade from lemons. I think anyone who is going through an eating disorder can attest to how difficult and overwhelming the process is. And it's a beautiful and encouraging thing to see and hear your story of hope, and how through all the brokenness and pain that you experienced, you came out through the other side and have been able to help so many people who have been struggling and dealing with that same pain. So we really appreciate you sharing.
Thank you.
What would you say are some of the key things that are helping you maintain long-term recovery? And I think that's a big question that a lot of people have. I think when you're in the structure of treatment and you have that ongoing support, it's a lot easier to sustain recovery. But for any of our members that are with us today and who are wondering, how do you maintain recovery for the long term when you don't have treatment support, when you don't have even a therapist that you're working in, or even just through different life changes that you're experiencing, which can re-trigger some of those old eating disorder behaviors? What would be some of your recommendations in that arena?
That's a great question, Crystal. And, I also wanted to reference what you were talking about, making lemonade out of lemons. That book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. If anyone has not read that book, I really recommend it. And there was a quote that I'm going to mull the quote, but basically the gist was, we can handle any pain and any suffering if we can find meaning in it. And I love that so much, because I know, Crystal, that you have found meaning in your struggle with your eating disorder, and you've poured so much of that into helping others recover eating disorder hope. And I hope to do some of that too. So certainly books can be helpful, right? Bibliotherapy. There's a lot of great books out there. So that's one thing. And the other is unconditional positive regard for myself, which I still fail at times, but I really work to do, or to give myself that gift. And I would say I borrowed that from my therapist for years. I would go in there and it would just feel like this cocoon of warmth, and I would just be like, oh, I need that. And I can kind of, most of the time, create that for myself. And that helps with everything, because I'm no longer holding myself up to performance for approval in any area, weight, work, how education, any of that. There's just an unconditional love I'm providing for myself.
Mhm.
Another key thing is I think that my personality style, and I have found that a lot of folks with eating disorders have shared with me they relate to this. I do not cope well on my own. I need a lot of environmental nurturing things around to soothe me. I get overwhelmed easily by stress. And recognizing that about myself and figuring out that I'm not going to control everything. I can't control others. The eventual outcome of so many of my dreams and goals, I can do my absolute best on, but I still can't guarantee the outcome. And that is cognitive dissonance, right? That's just the state of what I can control and what I can't control. And what I've found is the best coping skill for me with that, and maybe the key thing in eating disorder recovery, is my faith in God. Now,
Mhm.
I honor everyone's perspectives, including folks that don't believe in God. Whatever it is that you find is that soothing place for you. But for me, it's a faith in God and trusting that there is a loving, omniscient, omnipotent God that has it handled. And I can step back from some of my obsessing or controlling personality style behaviors and be and then complement that also with mindfulness techniques, which I also think are really helpful, and CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, talking back to those irrational thoughts and correcting them.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jacqueline. And I can relate to so many of the things that you shared from your own recovery journey. And I can share my story briefly too, but
Thank you. I'd
you
love
know,
that.
like, yeah, absolutely. Just how you said that there are biological predispositions that make certain people susceptible to having an eating disorder. And I definitely know that I myself had a lot of those personality traits and characteristics that did make me susceptible to having an eating disorder. And for me, same thing. I was born into a really loving family, had amazing supportive parents. I was one of five kids growing up, so we had a really big family. And, I think in a big family, when there is, limited resources to go around to everyone, sometimes as a child, you find that there is some validation in being achieving. Like I learned quickly as a child that when I did well and when I did things well, I would seek approval and I would gain attention in that way. So, um, but I think the thing that triggered it for me was in high school. I was a long distance runner and I ran cross country, and I quickly found that it was something that I did well and could gain recognition and approval for. And so it slowly became kind of an obsession for me. And I remember it was the summer before my senior year in high school. I was reading a runner's magazine and trying to figure out, okay, how can I make this the best year ever? And I remember reading something about a runner that she had wrote. She was a successful runner, and she wrote, yeah, for me, weight loss was what helped me as a runner, achieve all my goals and get to the place I wanted to be. And it was like, just like that, that seed was planted. Um, but, you know, I understand looking back now that there were a lot of things leading up to it, but I think that was the triggering onset of my eating disorder. Um, a lot of people diet. I think it's an unfortunate cultural thing where the dieting industry is $1 billion industry and there was constant fad diets going on. So I'm not trying to imply that all people who diet, um, have an eating disorder, but it can be a triggering factor. And it was for me. I started cutting out different food groups, very innocently, just trying to up my, you know, physicality with running, but it quickly spiraled out of control. And my running became a a very negative thing. And I became a compulsive exerciser, was running outrageous amounts of miles every week with not enough nutrition. And for me, that was kind of the onset of my anorexia. And so I struggled through high school and then into college. I didn't resolve the issues before I went to college. And with the transition of college, for so many individuals, there are those transitions in life that make it even more difficult to deal and cope with life. And for me, going to college was a really hard transition, being apart from my family, being in a different, part of the state. And so it perpetuated and really kind of got out of control for me. And I struggle with a lot of maladaptive eating behaviors. And I'm thankful that I had intervention and help before, it got to a point where I don't want to say there's no hope, but to a point where, really damaging things happened. And thankfully, my parents intervened and were able to help connect me to treatment. And I know I'm probably skipping over a lot of details, but my whole point of my story is that what I want to share is that no matter how far gone you think you might be, or if you're a family member with us today and you just feel like there's no way I can help my child or my loved one or my friend, break through the barriers or the shell of the eating disorder, it just seems like one of those things that you'll never get through. And I remember feeling that way too, like thinking, this is how my life is going to be. I can't imagine it being any different. And you mentioned books, Jacqueline, and one of the first books that I read that was so eye-opening for me was Life Without Ed by Jenni Schaefer. And that book helped me to see and realize that the eating disorder is a different entity from me. I always just felt so synonymous with my eating disorder. And after reading that book, I realized all these thoughts and things that I'm having, that are so negative and so detrimental about my body and my relationship with food are all part of my eating disorder. And when I started to identify it as a separate entity from myself, that really for me was life changing, I think. But yeah, lots of therapy, working with dietitians, and through my own recovery, I was so inspired by just this different mindset and mentality of living. Coming into a peaceful relationship with food was literally life changing for me and encouraged me to do the same. And so I became a dietitian as well, specializing in eating disorders, and was so fortunate to cross paths with you, Jacqueline, and when you were starting Eating Disorder Hope. And it's just been such a joy to be part of this community. And I can honestly say, I know a lot of people say this, and I don't want it to sound cliche, but I really want to encourage you who are listening today with the message of hope. I think anyone who's had an eating disorder really feels like that might not work for me. Like this, certain things might work for other people, but not for me. And I know I felt like that. Like I saw different people going through things and always kind of felt like, that might work for other people, but there's no way I'm going to change what I'm doing. And I did. Like eventually, it's not a short path or an easy path, but there were things that did help me. And even though I felt unreachable and hopeless a lot of the times, um, I was able to get through some of the most difficult, or the most difficult season of my life, I think, was those years when I was actively engaging in my eating disorder. And I just want to encourage our members who are joining us today with that same thing. Wherever life has found you right now, however far gone you think you may be, there is always, always hope. And you might not have all the answers right now, but you don't have to. It's just a matter of breaking that barrier, getting past that eating disorder voice that's telling you you can't do it. You can do it. You have to start by reaching out for help. I know that's kind of the thing that helped me realize that, okay, there is the possibility of life on the other side of this. And there absolutely is. And I know just hearing that from your story, Jacqueline, that, there were so many similarities there. It's hard when you've been engaged in something for so many years of your life to think that there is anything else outside of it. But I just want to encourage you today. And if you're listening, let us know if you agree with us or if you've experienced this. Feel free to share your comments with us. But we want you to find and go away with that message of hope today that, you can make it through this regardless of what has happened to you in your life. Would you say the same, Jacqueline?
Yeah, I would. I would say that that's part of our motivation in sharing this for our kickoff meeting is just to show families and individuals to folks with different experiences that have recovered from eating disorders that are able to now contribute meaningfully to helping others recover and give back, making sense of our suffering, making lemonade out of lemons. And your child, your sibling, your spouse, your friend, and if you're an individual with an eating disorder that's in our meeting today, you can do the same. And it never seemed possible days, and I see that we've had one question that I'd like to address, which I'd love to have you comment on too, Crystal, which is how can your child, if she is isolating herself from her, how can you help your child if she's isolating herself from friends and family? And or is this just part of recovery? And that I was an isolator, so I know what that's like. I refused to join the family for meals, and that did not go over well because we were a sit-down family. I mean, it was a big battle. And I would stay in my room on beautiful weekends when the family was out. I was very isolated, and it was very painful. And what I would suggest for you is, one, have this child engaged in some therapy right away so that she can start expressing her feelings and thoughts. Talk with her with the rest of the family present, even if you need to do so with a therapist, and let her know how it's impacting you gently, but that you're missing her, that you're longing for her to spend more time with you, and encourage her and support her in doing things with friends. Yet at the same time, we have to respect when someone is in sort of an implosion with their eating disorder. So you have to be very gentle and recognize that though they may not be able to even come out of the room right now, they may be able to get there with the right care. And in most cases, that means a professional treatment team, if it's an eating disorder, a bare minimum, a nutritionist and a therapist. And what would you say, Crystal?
Yeah, and that's such a great question. And Karen, thank you so much for sharing that. And our hearts just go out to you. I mean, I was in that position where my family was trying so hard to connect with me and didn't really understand what I was going through, and I didn't understand what I was going through. And I felt like every time they tried to reach out to me, it just pushed me away further. I just didn't want them to encroach on that part of my life, And so my encouragement is to continue being persistent in love. And that is what eventually connected to me. My family just wasn't going to give up on me. And, it's very easy to make things about the food and about weight, which are concerning factors, when you don't see your child eating, of course. But my family was so persistent, and I would say encouraging them in love and always trying to open up communication channels however you can, and things that don't necessarily have to do about food. Eating disorders are cries for help, and I think when we recognize those cries for help and we approach it, so for example, instead of saying something like, I think you should eat more or anything like that at a mealtime that seems to be a big struggle. Approaching it from the sense of, for example, I can see that this meal is a struggle for you, and I'm just really concerned for you, and I just want you to know that I'm here to help you, and I would love to do something with you because I care about you, things that help them kind of break out of that suffocating shell of the eating disorder. Offering to do things together that don't have to do with food, or if there's something that your child enjoys doing with you together, if it's taking a walk or um, sitting outside, or things that don't have to do with food or anything that's triggering or overwhelming. So I hope those suggestions help a little bit. But Karen, we really appreciate you being here and just hope the best for you and your family. And if you need some more insight, feel free to ask any questions that you might have.
Crystal, I was thinking, thank you for sharing your story too. It was really interesting. Every time I hear it, I pick up different things from you. I think that people listening would benefit from any warning signs you could share about athletes and eating disorders. Both if you are the athlete aspiring, it's like, well, how hard can I go? Or before I'm being obsessional. And also for loved ones and family members that are concerned about their kids with kids that or spouses or whatever that are dealing with sports and pressures to perform athletically.
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Jacqueline. And I see we have some more questions too, so we're going to get to those, and I'll answer your question too, because I think that's a really important thing that you asked. For so long, I hid under the guise of my eating disorder, or I'm sorry, of my sport. And, I was eating really healthy in the name of training. And I think that's why it went undercover for so long, because I was doing well. I was a really high functioning anorexic. And, that's something that a lot of people, I think, struggle with, is that they are doing well in school, in sports. On the outside, everything seems really put together, but inside I was dying. I was killing myself. And I think as a parent or a loved one, I would just encourage you to always trust your intuition. I think my parents were picking up on things pretty early on, but it's such a sensitive subject that I think sometimes we don't know how to address it or how to approach the people we care about without offending them. But there's a way to approach your loved one in a gentle, nurturing way that doesn't kind of push them off the edge. And I would say if there is something unsettling in you about your loved one that is setting off the red flags, don't ignore it. I would absolutely encourage you not to ignore it. I'm sorry about that. So that's my biggest encouragement, is really don't bury those warning signs that you're experiencing or feeling, and seek out help. If you feel like it's just over your head and you don't know how to approach it, talk to a counselor, a therapist, a specialist, your pediatrician or physician, anyone that you can process what you're feeling and thinking, and get some good advice and encouragement on how to approach it. Jacqueline, I'm going to read some of these questions that we're getting, and if you can address them, and I can help address them to you. And thank you for all the great questions so far, and please continue to feel free to submit them as we're discussing. So Tracy, thank you for joining us today. We're so glad you're here. I'm going to read out loud your question. Tracy asked, do either of you ever have to deal with feeling like you couldn't remember what it felt like before the eating disorder? I think that's what makes holding on to hope for me so hard sometimes. I can't remember life before my eating disorder anymore. Thanks for sharing, Tracy. Did you have any thoughts on that, Jacqueline?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. And I feel for you, because that's a painful feeling of just like, is this all there is, and how could it be different? And yes, I'm laughing at myself, because I can just remember these dark days with my eating disorder. And a lot of them, because they were in my teens and 20s, were on buses. I don't know why, but I was taking buses to go binge, and then to college, and then quitting college. And I was just always in this sort of fog and depression, and I just felt despair. And I really couldn't remember what it was like to be that 10, 11-year-old girl that was just full of herself and never even questioned or thought about her body. And it was really hard to see that the future could be different, almost impossible. And the thing that I would really encourage you to do is envision your future well, happy, and hold on to that. And even when you feel like it's a pipe dream, hold that thought, because I never in a million years would have believed I could have turned this around. And it's significant. And then also remember back joyful times when you, before the eating disorder, even if you have to go clear back to childhood, but just feeling vital and alive and present in the moment and not obsessed with the food or the calories or the weight or any of the other behaviors with the eating disorder, and try to catch that emotion that you felt and tie that emotion into the vision of your future in recovery. And the reason I suggest that is there's been some research over the years that shows when we can tie really strong emotion into a goal or a dream that we have, we're far more likely to attain it.
I love that. And yeah, Tracy, I can definitely relate to that. Like I said, I was so far gone into my eating disorder that I just thought this was how my life was going to be and really couldn't remember. I mean, vaguely I remembered what like childhood was growing up, but when you're so stuck in it, it just doesn't feel like life will ever be anything different. And I love Jacqueline's suggestions. I would definitely encourage you to just sit down and imagine, what would my life be like without these eating disorder behaviors? Or what do you hope to do? And just imagine for one day that there was nothing involved with your eating disorder, or those eating disorder barriers were not there. And create that vision for yourself and know that you can absolutely make that possible for yourself through treatment and recovery interventions. And let that be hope to cling forward to. Sometimes you have to look forward instead of looking back, if that kind of makes sense. But we definitely feel for you and hope that you can find, you know, your own sense of hope and vision in your future without an eating disorder. Let's see. We have a comment from Karen. She shared, as a parent, I also read Life Without Ed, and I think not only the ED person read it, but also parents, and it has helped me try to understand eating disorders. Yeah, and I agree with you, Karen. I think for any family members or friends that are with us today, and if you're feeling like I don't understand what my child is going through, or you know, the eating disorder, Life Without Ed is a great book. I would highly encourage that book. I don't know, do you have any other recommendations, Jacqueline, for any of our family members with us today?
Yeah, NEDA has a really cool National Eating Disorders Association. I bet you all know of that group. If you go to their website, they have a parent and family and friends group that you can join, and I believe that they have a listserv kind of a function with emails, and you can get support and ideas there. We also, on Eating Disorder Hope, have a ton of articles about dealing with friends, family members, spouses with an eating disorder, from first addressing it with them and how to do that, to how to talk about through feelings or deal with your anger about the situation, all kinds of resources there.
Yeah, that's a good one. We also have a comment from Lori. Thanks for sharing today, Lori. She shared, I just want to echo your message. I didn't think I would ever recover from anorexia. I gave up for a very long time, and I was even afraid to be without the eating disorder. But ultimately, I still did recover. That was in 2003. No regrets. That's fantastic.
Thank you, Lori. Congratulations. We love that you're here and giving back that inspiration. I'm sure you'll end up being kind of a leader inspiring others. Hope you'll share some in the forum about your experiences with recovery too, because I know I just couldn't get enough of it when I was embedded in my eating disorder, to hear of people that had actually pulled themselves out of it and what life was like now.
Mm-hmm. And Lori, I like how you said too that you were even afraid of being without the eating disorder. And I think that's such an overlooked thing. You know, like it's eating disorders wouldn't continue if they weren't helping us in some way, right? So they're feeding something in us that we need, and it's a maladaptive coping mechanism, but it's helping us survive, at least temporarily. I mean, you know, of course, the long-term effects are very detrimental, but, you know, we wouldn't have an eating disorder if we didn't need it. And so I think you hit a really important fact right there, that sometimes recovery is so hard because we don't want to let go of it, and we're afraid to be without it. And I think it's when you start learning those different coping mechanisms, you realize I can let this go and I can still survive in life in ways that aren't harmful to me. So thank you for sharing that. Helen, thanks for joining us today, Helen. She shared, "This is really good. Thank you for doing it. I've been in recovery for a year and a few months. I'm in my 50s, have struggled with restricting for many, many years." Thanks for sharing that, Helen, and welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Hi, Helen. I'm glad you're here. I can really appreciate I'm 52, and it's, you know, it's interesting to look back over life, and so you've had a little over a year, I think, Crystal, you read in recovery. Congratulations. That is enormously difficult behavior to change, and I'm so glad you're with us, and we can encourage you and support you in the forums and these membership meetings and in other ways. Welcome.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing, Helen. Cheryl, thanks for reaching out, Cheryl. She commented, "I was recovered for 8 years after high school, married, had kids, now going through a divorce, and have been completely relapsed. I based a lot of my worth on being recovered, and now I don't know if true recovery is even possible anymore. Was I just kidding myself?"
Cheryl, I want to hug you because I'm so sorry for the divorce. It's so painful. And you're not alone. A lot of people go through divorces, and it's a major life-changing event. And we know for all of our lives, people with eating disorders are more likely to have relapse when major changes occur in our lives. It could be empty nest syndrome when the kids go to school. It could be like for Crystal when she went away to college. That contributed further. There's so many major life changes. Just take a look at that. You know, you can look online and see a list of major life stresses. Those are the changes.
Yeah.
And you know, I think it's understandable that you would fall back into some of the behaviors of the eating disorder while you're probably grasping to cope with the pain and frustrations of reorganizing your life after this tremendous change. And most of us would struggle to a degree with going through that and in our eating disorder recovery. And I can share with you that over my years of recovery, there was none of this ever. I have friends that did that, but it wasn't me. And there were many times, particularly in my, you know, that 28 to 33, the first 5 years of recovery, I would feel like, is this really not just completely back to ground zero? How can I say I've made progress? Because I would be back in the behavior sometimes for 2 or 3 days and really get into it. And I learned something, and I really encourage you to do this too, my dear. Get back up on that horse. I don't care how bad you feel like you've fallen off the track of your recovery. You can turn it around this minute, tomorrow morning. As soon as you can get that energy, you get back up on that horse, you resume those behaviors that you know support your recovery and well-being. You forgive yourself for the relapse and you move on. And you unfortunately may have to do that at different times of your life or periodically for a long time. But there's a value in that too, which is you grow in self-respect every time you do it, because you're like, dang, I pulled myself out of that again, and that was really hard. There's a strong being in here that wants to be healthy and well, and she's shining through. And she's still there for you, Cheryl, even when you feel like, you know, maybe the relapse is still active. That's okay. You can turn this around, and we're here to offer support. There's no therapy or counseling available here. This is really just a support group and sort of psychoeducation with some things we can share. But we also strongly encourage you to get back together with the team that helped you recover if they're available, or at the very least see a new therapist and a new nutritionist just to get back on track. You're worth it, you deserve it, and we need you in recovery with us.
Absolutely. And I echo everything you said, Jacqueline. And Cheryl, just want to say thank you for sharing and thank you for reaching out. I think that's the first step. And I think I think we need to kind of redefine what recovery is. You know, I like to say that I'm in recovery, not recovered, because I think it's an ongoing process, you know. And you know what? Relapse is part of recovery. I think a lot of us just kind of, when we default into those behaviors, tend to be really critical of ourselves and think, gosh, I was doing so well and now I'm not doing well anymore, and just kind of feel like everything went out the window. But I would encourage you to look at this as part of your journey. And like I said, with us today, and that says something. So, you know, like Jacqueline said, you have to take the next best step for you. You have to do the next best thing to keep you going in recovery. And for you, that might mean getting back in therapy, getting back into a support group, whatever it is. You're going to need that extra support through all the different stressors you're going through in life. And just remember that relapse is part of your journey too. There's no such thing as recovering perfectly. I think we've all heard that expression that it's about the journey, not the end result. You know, it's not about the destination. It's about what are we learning and how are we developing and evolving in our recovery throughout the journey. So stay connected with us as a means of support and encouragement, and know that you are absolutely not alone. And also, we have a lot of great articles on eating disorder hope. So if you're needing some more articles about relapse, we also have our inspirational stories page on EDH. And there's some really great testimonies on there of people who have been through all kinds of things. So we hope that encourages you a little bit. And thank you. I see that you just responded too. So thank you for being willing to share and be vulnerable with us today. We're so glad that you're here. Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and we have one from Tracy. Oh, Tracy's just sharing, having been in higher level treatment multiple times, I have learned something about myself every time. So just to reiterate, relapse is not the end. And yes, I think we can all agree with that, Tracy, and thank you for sharing that. That's absolutely so true. Okay, we have one question from Karen. Karen's asking, my daughter doesn't want to go into group therapy, and I think you're saying is only willing to see a professional at this point. I'm trying to encourage her, but she says she isn't ready. What do you think about on her not wanting to join group therapy? Do you have any thoughts on that, Jacqueline?
Yeah, I do. I think that if she is willing to see a therapist, that's a great step forward. And I think that the one, this is my opinion as a therapist, so take it or leave it, but I think that is probably the most valuable for her right now, that one-on-one interaction with someone that can help her see maybe ways that she's thinking incorrectly, or evaluate her relational skills and how she can get her needs met better. So I would say that is really good if she is seeing a therapist on one-on-one. So let's applaud her for that and really be happy about that. It would be wonderful if she would go into group therapy if it's a well-supervised group and carefully managed. You know, a lot of times in my practice, I had gals come in that were triggered by other group members and things like that. So it can be good and it can be bad with groups. I think overall they're great because in most cases you've got good people leading them and everyone there's trying to encourage and support each other. But if she's not willing to go into a group at this time, I would just, you know, maybe talk to the therapist that she's seeing and see if there are any groups that she recommends that are excellent, and ask, you know, about what the dynamics are like there, and just keep it on the back burner as something you could continually offer to her. I'm not sure that forcing her in an outpatient way to attend a group would be beneficial, because most of us don't like to feel controlled like that. What do you think, Crystal? That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think a lot of it kind of depends on her specific situation. You know, I'm not sure all the details with her and how old she is and the severity of her eating disorder. So sometimes more drastic interventions are needed depending on the severity of the eating disorder and her age and things like that. So I would just encourage you to maybe talk with other professionals to get clear advice, because I think there's a lot of different factors that could be involved. And you know, this kind of reminds me too of a point I wanted to make to our family members with us today is, you know, and Jacqueline, you shared some of this just in your own journey about what your family went through. And we recognize that family members are going through a lot of pain, a lot of confusion. And, you know, we don't want you to feel like you're alone either. So many times family members need to see a counselor or a therapist too, so that they can work through some of the issues and questions that they're facing. So, you know, Karen, maybe it would be helpful to talk with someone, a professional, to get a better assessment and a clear idea on the big picture and figure out what would be most helpful for her moving forward in her recovery. So hopefully that helps you a little bit. And thank you again for being willing to share, Karen. Well, we have reached the end of our support group meeting. And we're so thankful that all of you took the time to join us today, and we hope that this was helpful and encouraging for you in some way. We would love your feedback. You know, we really want to hear what you're wanting out of these meetings so that we can better structure them for you. You know, if this kind of Q&A is helpful, please let us know. Or if you have any other ideas or tips or suggestions on how you would like these meetings to go, we are creating these meetings with you in mind. So I think there'll be something opened up in the forum for the membership. If you're not already in there, we would encourage you to jump in and jump on some of the great threads that are going on there. And if you have questions still that you are wanting to answer or get some feedback, we would encourage you to post them in the forum. I think there's a lot of great people who are part of this membership program who are at different points of their eating disorder journey who can have or offer you some really good insight. So definitely jump in there, and we are excited to do this again next month. Did you have any closing thoughts, Jacqueline, or anything you wanted to end with?
I'm just grateful that you all came. It's been wonderful. Really enjoyed the questions and the thoughts of the members. One question I'd really like to know is, would you guys like the opportunity for us to be able to share your screen by choice? We want to honor everyone's privacy, but the platform that we use would allow us to have you let us know, you know, you could indicate like on the question that you would like to speak and share your screen, and all that would mean would be you need to have a camera on your computer. And then, actually, you could probably do it from your phone too.
Mhm.
But we were headed, obviously we didn't want to do that in the first one to make anyone uncomfortable. We would never show anyone's face or full name unless they wanted it to be that way. But I think it might be nice as we grow as a group to be able to have a virtual group where we get to see each other and get to know each other better. So let us know your thoughts in the forum on that, and we'll certainly take that into consideration.
Mhm. Absolutely. So thank you again to everyone who joined us today. Thank you so much to those of you who opened up and just were willing to share about yourselves and a little bit about your stories and ask us your questions. We're so honored that you're here and part of this community. And we are excited to touch base again next month. So between now and then, please jump in the forum. And until then, we wish you all the best. Thanks again for joining and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.